This is Anish Chauhan and this is Equilibrium Security. It's time to tackle your biggest cyber security challenges head on.
Hello and welcome to our latest edition of our video podcast. For those of you that already have seen or listened or subscribed to our channel, you'll know that we always have fantastic guest speakers, and today is no exception. This time we're joined by Claire Vandenbroecke. Hi, Claire.
Hello.
So Claire is an information cybersecurity consultant, been consulting for 6 years, in the industry for 20. We've got loads to talk about. The episode today is going to be called The Next Chapter, ISO 27001, and the impact it has on corporate security. It's in October 2022, I believe, a new version of the standard was created. It's been a massive gap, hasn't it, between the previous version and this iteration? You know, not 9 years or so, 2017, I think it was. It feels like a lifetime. That gap in certainly in information security feels huge. Yeah. Why was the update done now, and what's the impact been on it happening at this moment in time?
Yeah, I think like with a lot of kind of like compliance and regulations, they're obviously looked at and reviewed and updated periodically anyway.
Sure, okay.
And ISO are obviously kind of keeping an eye on what's happening out there.
Okay.
Other kind of frameworks such as Cyber Essentials and NIST have also had recent updates as well.
Yes.
So I think it is just part of their ongoing cycle.
Okay.
It is quite a long gap to have kind of waited, I think, in terms of technology in particular. Yeah, that's quite a significant gap. I mean, if you think about, what did technology look like back in 2017?
Yeah.
I think smart devices were just starting to come into their own. Yeah. And we didn't, AI and machine learning was only just kind of...
Oh, it's just still just coming out. I guess most people would probably never even thought about it,
absolutely not.
Everyday scene.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, these days, I kind of can't walk down my street passing my neighbours' doors without the ping of like their kind of video doorbells going off,
That really
Whereas, it used to be like one person in the street used to have it. It'd be like they're with the person who like back in the day we had probably the first people to get the colour TV,
That's
and it's like, ooh, this is fancy. Whereas now, it's just standard. I think I'm the only one who doesn't have one.
Likewise.
On my street.
That helps.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously AI, I mean, that's a huge topic at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's just being used, all over the place, and if we look at how consumers are able to now use it and work with data, thanks to the likes of, Chat GPT and Copilot, it's completely changed the playing field for technology.
Incredibly. So before I go to the next question, actually, what about the annex? So there's the normal standard, and then there's the annex, isn't it? And I think you sort of suggested that the annex does get updated a little bit more frequently. What's the difference between the main standard and the annex, just for those that aren't aware?
Yeah, and it is something which actually it took me a while to get my head around when I first started working with ISO 27001, and businesses find it really difficult as well, because Annex A is also known as ISO 27002.
Okay, yeah.
And so people are asking, and I asked, why don't you get certified against 27002?
Yeah.
Why is it just 27001?
Yes.
And it's just the way they have to label the different parts of the actual full standard.
Right.
So 27001 has the main clause structure, which are the mandatory requirements.
Yeah.
And their clauses, there's clauses 1 to 10, but it's clauses 4 to 10, which actually have some requirements that the business has to meet.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're mandatory. And so there isn't anything you can do to not actually meet those requirements.
Okay.
What the Annex A is all the controls that relates to information security, cyber security, and privacy protection,
right,
which is what ISO 27001 addresses. Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth noting at this juncture to say that privacy protection is really important, because I think a lot of people misunderstand what 27001 is. They think it's about information security, so it should sit with the IT people. It's all about technology, and it's so much bigger than that, and all aspects of the organisation come into it. So that's where the controls really kind of come into their own. So if you kind of see it written down as Annex A or ISO 27002, it's the same thing.
Okay.
It's just an annex to 27001. So those different controls will obviously mostly be applicable to most businesses. But if there are some which aren't, then the business is allowed to explain why that isn't applicable.
Right.
Okay. Why they they don't have to provide evidence
Yeah.
to me.
Well, that's clearly up for me, so hopefully for everyone else as well.
Oh, good.
So what happens if, as an organisation, you're already certified, however many years ago, or 2 or 3 or 5, but then now the new standard is coming in? What do people need to be aware of in terms of recertifying then, if you already have that standard?
Yeah. Okay. Well, if they haven't already, and they should have had some contact from their certification body.
Yeah.
But if they haven't, that's the first thing they should be doing.
Okay.
Speaking to them about the transition window that's available to them.
Yeah.
And also they'll need to have some transition audits done as well.
Yeah.
So it all depends at what stage of the 3-year certification cycle they're in.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the way it works is you have your first year where you get the certificate.
Yeah.
Then you have 2 years of surveillance audits and then a full certification.
Right. Yeah.
So usually what would happen is you'd be aiming to migrate to the new standard in time for your next certification.
Okay. Yeah.
But there is a cut-off point.
Right.
So October 2025, I believe it is,
Okay.
is when all organisations have to be aligned with the 2022 edition.
Oh, so it's not that far away, really, in real terms, is it really?
No.
Sounds like it's far, but it's not.
No, we obviously think where we are now. Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
It's not far.
Yeah.
And when you think how long it actually would take,
Yeah.
it's not a full implementation, but it usually takes around 6 to 8 months to implement it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a little bit of extra work for the businesses.
Yeah.
But hopefully they should be able to just implement it and kind of integrate it with their current kind of practices and change management if they're doing it properly.
Yes.
So hopefully it shouldn't be too difficult.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, hopefully we'll come into more of that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we've talked a little bit about that there has been a change. We've talked about that the change is looming. What has actually changed? I guess. Yeah.
It's like the burning question.
Still a very question. Yeah.
Well, first of all, there's not much change to the actual clause structure.
Okay.
That kind of clause is like 1 to 10, or as most businesses will see it as 4 to 10.
Yeah.
The first 3 are just basically setting the scene for the actual standard itself. That's some minor changes have just been brought in line with other other management systems.
Yes.
That ISO has in place.
Right.
Such as 9001, 14001.
Yeah.
So that clause structure is actually the same across all of their management system standards now.
Right. Okay.
So that's helped to bring 27001 in line with them.
There's a bit of repeatability across the. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So there can be a bit of a crossover if you've got more than one, system in place.
Okay.
And then the controls, the Annex A controls, they've actually been ordered and restructured in a really helpful way. I think it's a massive improvement in my opinion.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So although they've introduced 11 new controls, because they've merged some of them,
Yeah.
it's actually gone down from 119 to 94.
Okay.
So, it's not a massive reduction, but it all helps.
It all helps, definitely.
Yeah, when you're kind of trying to get your head around it all.
Definitely.
The biggest improvement, I would say, is the actual structure of the controls themselves.
Okay.
So there used to be 14, and there was a bit of a kind of jumping around. I think, obviously, as they've been building it and revising it in 2017, they've kind of obviously had to bring in new things, whereas they've done a complete overhaul, and now it's just 4 control areas,
Right, okay.
which really helps to kind of see how it fits across the business.
Across the business. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then do those 14 controls, those that are now 4, you mentioned you touched on the fitting into the business. Do they align more with the organisational structure? So as in are they more aligned to legal and compliance and technology and things like that? Is that how it's kind of set itself out?
It is, yeah. They've done a great job, I would say. So it starts with your organisational controls, then it's your people controls, physical controls, and technological controls.
Yeah.
So straight away you can kind of see which departments would start having to have some kind of input and responsibility in implementing and managing and improving constantly those particular control areas.
And it kind of makes it easier to carve up a little bit, doesn't it, really? Because rather than it being an IT issue, as a lot of these things are, it's actually legal and HR and, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think the organisational controls is the one where maybe it's split a bit between a few different departments because of what's within that particular section. But it would be, you know, kind of a combination of facilities, security, operations managers.
Yes.
There's a little bit of kind of HR and IT in there, but only maybe one or two things.
Okay.
But it is more about the organisation as a whole in terms of how they're managing the information security.
Right, yeah. Which is what the standard is about, really, isn't it? Yeah.
And it ties really closely to the clause areas as well.
Yeah.
So what I kind of find when I'm speaking with my clients is we'll be going through the clauses, and I'll say, well, by meeting this, you've actually ticked off quite a few of those controls in the organisational control section.
Yeah.
So you can see the kind of thing, oh, thank God for that. You know, we're carving away in other bits while we're doing this kind of mandatory stuff as well. So there's a real correlation there, which kind of really helps, you know, to demonstrate why it works.
Yes.
And then the others are very, you know, kind of quite obvious, self-explanatory. People controls. That would obviously be the domain of HR,
of course,
with a bit of support from IT to do with, you know, access management, joiners, movers, leavers processes, that kind of thing. And also maybe it's a little bit around the kind of, you know, the physical kind of handling the assets and, you know, managing them off-site, things like that.
Yeah.
That's where you might see a bit of a crossover. Physical controls, obviously, you know, kind of speaks for itself. And technological controls would be the domain of the IT department. If you've got any kind of in-house software development, you'd have like DevOps, you know, would be kind of included in that as well. Any kind of development of code and software and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. So you mentioned there, and it's kind of going to be a point that I'm going to bring up a few times actually, but it's about, you know, these standards are often seen as being an IT issue, right? So it's not, that's not correct, is it? You know, what departments should ultimately be involved in? I know you touched on HR and legal and things. What departments should be involved in implementing an ISMS effectively? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in addition to obviously what we've already kind of discussed.
Yeah.
It's very clear in the clause structure, the mandatory requirements of the standard, that it has to have investment and buy-in and an actual, you know, engagement, active engagement from leadership. So from the top down.
That's so important, isn't it?
It is. And it, you know, it's a message that, you know, all kind of organisations, government organisations are saying, you know, it should be a business concern, not just an IT concern when we're coming to information security. Yeah. And again, that's reflected in the actual full title of the standard.
Yeah.
It's cybersecurity, information security and privacy protection. Yeah. So that does cross over into your legal and regulatory requirements. Got to think about GDPR, Data Protection Act and, you know, and everything else. EU have just brought in, you know, a new AI Act. So developers of AI would have to kind of, you know, bring that in and consider that. But absolutely, the clause structure leans very heavy on providing or asking organisations to provide evidence of leadership, buy-in and involvement and contribution.
Yeah.
So things like, you know, there is actually a clause which is entitled leadership, another one which is entitled support, and that's about the leadership showing that they're actively supporting the workforce. Yeah. To implement this and be responsible as well.
That sounds really good, actually. It sounds like it's really needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it also helps because a lot of clients I work with, it is the IT department who are asked to do this because, you know, majority of the time it's a contractual requirement.
Sure.
Yeah. And so the IT department are given it. And when we start to go through the clauses, and you can see they will be like, oh, great. So I actually have to get these people involved. Yeah. And it's not that they didn't want to be involved. They just didn't know that they had to be so involved.
Yeah,
They're supporting it because they've obviously given the budget and, you know, kind of, you know, signed off on the project.
Yeah.
But then actually it's really helping those other departments realise that, it's a joint effort.
Yeah.
Really.
And I guess it stops it being so much of a box ticking exercise as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And done kind of correctly, it can really benefit the business.
Yes.
And a lot of what is being asked of the business is possibly already being done anyway.
Yeah.
It's just about evidencing it.
It is, yeah. There's a kind of thing I like to say is that really compliance with something like this should be a natural byproduct, shouldn't it, really, to doing things correctly, which I think was pretty much what you've just said.
Yeah. One
key point I think I'd like to use to help summarise this is you said that if organisations are going for multiple standards, they can combine efforts. Is there something you can sort of, use that to sort of summarize, I guess, the approach that organizations should take?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You often find that when I'm working with clients, they will already have another ISO standard in place. It's usually 9001 or 14001.
Yeah.
Sometimes 45001, just because of the industry they're working in.
Sure.
It's a requirement.
It is. Yeah.
Requirement. And they don't realise that actually they could combine a lot of what they're doing already into their 27001 management system.
Okay, yeah.
Because of that clause structure. Now that obviously it's more aligned. I mean, it pretty much was anyway.
Okay.
And obviously there will be slight differences in the requirements within those clauses depending on the subject matter. But the structure is exactly the same, so the approach should be the same.
Excellent.
The way in which they kind of manage change and review and audit, they can combine their audits.
Yeah.
So the certification body would be able to come in and actually audit against all of them together. That's going to reduce costs, it's going to reduce effort, it's going to reduce time, and it would just make their lives a lot easier. And
it makes each one easier to tackle next time round.
Absolutely. It's basically it's what they call an integrated management system.
Right. Yeah.
And the ISO website actually has a bit of information about that. And obviously there's lots of information out there about the benefits and how you would actually do that.
Okay.
There's kind of a big table out there of all the different comparisons of all the different management systems and how they align and cross over.
And there is a lot of alignment, isn't there?
There is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Claire. That's been really interesting for me. Hopefully you found it useful chatting about it as well.
Yes,
great having an expert on. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching. Look out for the next episode, which is going to be episode 11, where we'll have another great guest in the cyber hot seat.